Welcome to the Parks and Rec meeting. This is July 25th, 2017. For the general public, all the handouts are in the back. We also have speaker cards if you want to speak about any item, whether it's on the agenda or not. Fill out a speaker card, please. Okay, first we have roll call.
Yes. Commissioner Cribbs. Here. Commissioner Greenfield. Here. Commissioner Lemire.
Here.
Commissioner McCauley.
Here.
Commissioner McDougall.
Here.
Commissioner Moss.
Here.
And Commissioner Reckdahl.
Here.
And Councilmember Adrian Fine. Absent.
Okay, we move on to agenda changes, request deletions. Does anyone have any suggestions? Okay,
Chair, I actually have a suggestion for mostly for future meetings, but I thought at this meeting it might be helpful as well, is to move the department report up on the agenda ahead of oral communications or after oral communications, either way, but just so that members of the public who are here can hear the department report and staff who are reporting on different things can do that at the beginning.
I'm happy with that. Does anyone have any?
Great idea.
Okay. Well, let's move that up today. So the department report will move up right before business, between oral communications and business. Okay. So that brings us to, we do have oral communications. Jessica Brittle is going to speak.
Thank you, Chair Reckdahl, Commissioners. Thank you for letting me be here this evening. My name is Jessica Brittle. I've met some of you. If not, I'm upstairs on the 7th floor in the clerk's office. I'm here today, as we normally do, to announce a recruitment that we have for a new committee. This committee is the Stormwater Management Oversight Committee. As you guys might recall, back in November, we held an election with property owners to increase our stormwater management fee. So this new committee will be in charge of overseeing the budget and the disbursement of those funds for the stormwater management fee. We like to come to talk to all of you because we know that you're well connected and you know folks in the community, and we really encourage you to talk to them and encourage them to apply. The deadline to apply for this committee is August 1st, which is next week. They can apply online, or they can give us a call in the clerk's office and apply via the internet or PDF, or we make it easy on them. If they have any questions, they can call us as well. As a side note, this committee does not meet every month. It's probably twice a year. So if you know someone who wants to start getting involved but maybe doesn't have a huge time slot to be involved, this is a good start for them to get involved in the community. So I'm going to put some flyers in the back if you want to take them home with you, if you know of anybody. But I appreciate your time this evening. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Jessica. Now we move on to the next, which is department report.
Good evening, Commissioners. Kristen O'Kane, Community Services Department. I have two things to report, and then I'm going to turn it over to Darren Anderson, who has some updates as well. The first is I just wanted to report back on our aquatics program. Palo Alto Swim and Sport will be officially taking over the aquatics program on August 14th with oversight by city staff. The contract with the Rinconada Masters is still not finalized, but we are very close. We just have a few things to work out, but I do believe we're very close and we will get there soon. And we are working with Palo Alto Swim and Sport to get the website updated and to just make sure everything is fine-tuned and ready to go on August 14th. The second thing I wanted to just report out on is just a follow-up on an article that was in the Daily Post related to the San Francisco Mime Troupe. In May of this year, the San Francisco Mime Troupe applied for a permit to perform at Mitchell Park. In addition to performing, the permit application stated that the Mime Troupe would be soliciting donations at the event. The council adopted park and open space rules and regulations prohibit the solicitation of donations in parks. So staff informed the Mime Troupe that they could have their event at Mitchell Park, they just could not solicit donations at the event. The mime troupe subsequently removed the performance at Mitchell Park from their 2017 summer schedule. And just to follow up on that, we are talking with the mime troupe. I spoke with them today, actually, to see how we can possibly get them to come to Palo Alto this summer and perform at Mitchell Park. That is something that works for them, but also complies with our municipal code and our parks rules and regulations. So we're still determining how that might work. We are hopeful that they will come and perform this year in Palo Alto. They've been coming for a number of years, and we are happy to have them. Unfortunately, we need to enforce our rules and regulations at the park. We can't have a lot of discussion on this tonight because it wasn't an agendized item, but if the commission would like to agendize not necessarily this issue, but maybe the specific rule that's in question or that came to light for a future meeting, we would be happy to do that.
Yeah, we're planning already next month to talk about the commercial in parks, commercial activity in parks. So I think we could roll this into that. Do you think that's good timing?
Sure. Yeah, that would be
Okay.
great.
Okay.
Did we pay them to come to the park to perform?
No, we don't pay them. They apply for a permit to come and perform, and then they would pay the fees that are outlined in the municipal fee schedule.
Okay.
Okay.
And now I'll turn it over to Darren for an update on the Foothill Trails.
Good evening, Darren Anderson, Open Space Parks and Golf. I wanted to share the latest with our problem trails up at Foothills Park. This is Costanoan Trail and Los Trancos Trail. And I've got a couple photos. This is a map of the preserve that shows the various closure spots. I apologize, it's rather small, but to fit it in and give it context, it had to be. And it shows a number of slides and washouts along Los Trancos. And it's got a closure of a little under 3 miles. This is the backside of Los Trancos that's closed. And the Costanoan Trail, this segment here that's just under a mile, was closed in March. And it's all a result of this very, very heavy rains that we received in this winter. We received 23.5 inches in January and February, whereas that's about what we get in an average year. So it was a year's worth of rain in 1 month, and the result was a lot of these typically problematic areas that have minor washouts that are problematic and usually could be maintained without having to reroute or do much. It's just manual work, or sometimes with our trail contractor, he brings in a small piece of, it's heavy equipment, but it's very narrow and can fit onto trails and fix things. This is beyond that scope, and I've got a few photos to show. So the trail tread up here and the absence of the trail. You could see some of the old header board that had been part of a probably a 1980s installment to support that edge had completely washed out all the way down to the creek. So this is Los Trancos right along the creek's edge. It's another section, I think the same washout, same board, but you could just see the soils are so loose. There's just no way of cutting back into that without damaging and causing significant impacts to the creek. In some of these photos, out of context, it's hard to even see where the trail is anymore. This isn't just a bunch of refuse. This is uphill debris that has slid down. The trail's far off screen now. This is the Costanoan section of the trail, and this was a bigger landslide in terms of the amount of land that moved, but it's a little more localized. It wasn't on so many numerous spots. It's one significant spot, and the trail just slid out. They're unsafe. We closed those trails because it was no longer safe for visitors to hike on them. And this is another section where that is on top of what once was trail. Same Costanoan spot. So the actions we took is we met with our trail consultant, walked the site with him, got his best opinion on what he thought we should do. His suggestion was, some of this I can repair, but your significant washouts, both the Costanoan and several sections of Los Trancos, your best technique would be rerouting that trail away from the creek onto more stable soils. We also hired a geologist to come out, hike the site with us, and get his opinion too. He had the same opinion that in those two areas, unless you're prepared to spend significant amount of money and very lengthy permitting processes to come out, excavate massive amounts of soil down to bedrock and rebuild it, you're going to have to reroute. And the environmental impact of doing that would be so harmful, I don't think it would ever get permitted. It makes so much more sense to reroute. So the next step was to consult with our partners at Mid-Peninsula Regional Open Space District. They have 50,000 acres plus of land that they manage. So they're installing new trails and rerouting trails far more frequently than we have, which we haven't done in my tenure with the city. And asked them for their advice. What do you think we're looking at in terms of permitting, review processes, et cetera? And their advice was, if you're going to do the reroute, you're going to, because they're sensitive species, on Los Trancos, you've got the steelhead potential, and on the coast of Noan, you've got the dusty-footed wood rat, that we should hire a consultant and go ahead and go through the CEQA analysis, which would be the initial study and the mitigated negative declaration. So that's the next steps for us, is to find that consultant, work with our trail contractor to confirm this realignment. He kind of eyeballed one in the field, but now it has to be hiked, measured out, and in consultation with that consultant, work through that CEQA process. So that's the next steps. We're going to get bids very shortly and move forward with that one. And we'll learn more about what kind of timeframes that consultant says on the permitting. Hopefully it's not too difficult. So that's where we are on that project.
But it sounds like it's going to be many months.
I think so. Yeah, I think so.
Okay. That's unfortunate. Those are nice trails.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, is that it for the department report?
Yes, that's it.
Okay. Sorry, I was waiting for you. Okay, so we move on to business. Approval for draft minutes. Does anyone have any corrections or comments? Okay. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
Excuse me.
Oh.
So I wasn't here, so I don't have any corrections, obviously. But I do have a question about how to proceed with a number of questions that I have from reading the minutes. Should I be writing a memo to Kristen, or should I be bringing them up here? Doesn't make sense. I know that.
You can ask me those questions, and if I need to follow up with another staff person, I can do that.
Okay, so I could just call you and spend half an hour
Sure.
sometime. Okay, Thank you.
Yep.
Do we have a motion to approve the minutes?
I'll move to approve.
Okay. Do we have a second? Okay. All in favor? Aye. So we had, let's see, 4 last month? 4 commissioners at the meeting last month?
Correct.
Okay. So let's see, it was Lemire, Rekdal, Cribbs, and Ryan. Okay. So approved 4-0. Okay, next we'll move on to Park Trails, Open Space, and Recreation, and the master plan. We do have 1 speaker card. Do you want to do a presentation first or the speaker card first? Do you have a presentation to give?
I'll do the presentation
Okay.
first.
And generally, we like the presentation better, but sometimes if it's a skimpy presentation, we just move straight to the comments. Okay. Kristen, you can take over.
Sure. Kristen O'Kane, Community Services. So tonight we have an action related to the Parks Master Plan, and it is specifically a recommendation for the Parks and Rec Commission to recommend that council approve the master plan and adopt the mitigated negative declaration, which is the CEQA document that was prepared for the master plan. To my right, I have Barbara Beard from MIG here with me to provide some information on the public comments that we received during the public review period for the CEQA initial study. Before we get into that, I wanted to review one change to the master plan that was a result of the May 22nd council meeting. And at that meeting, council made a motion to request staff to rework a specific policy in the master plan. So I would like to review those changes, hear commission feedback on those particular changes, and then I'll turn it over to Barbara to go into the CEQA comments. So at the May 22nd council meeting, council made a motion specifically to direct staff to strengthen the language of programs 6C1, 6C2, and 6C3 to minimize private exclusive use, and when such uses are allowed, charge significant fees and include specific outreach language. So staff attempted to revise that policy, and also I did receive some comments from the ad hoc that was put together for, not for the master plan, but the field use policy ad hoc. So I did receive some comments from them. And I did some rewording, or we did some rewording in that policy, but I wanted to specifically go over what was added to the programs in response to that council motion. So the first was, they're all related really to program 6C1, the new 6C1, and that is to limit the number of days for private uses to a maximum of 5 consecutive days. And that would include event setup and breakdown. The reason that number was chosen was to avoid an event going over a 2-weekend period. So the 5 days would force the event to only be on one weekend or the other, or just during the week. The next would be, the next addition was notice of the private event will be made to the neighboring community and facility users 14 days in advance. And the third, one little, we originally had that all private events would have a public meeting associated with it, and then we added, unless they were only one day. If it was a one-day event, we wouldn't require a public meeting, but anything over one day, we would include a public meeting in the outreach efforts. And then we kept the statement that cost recovery, including wear and tear, on the facility should be 100%. So those were the additions that were made to the programs under policy 6C. And if any commissioners wanted to ask questions or provide feedback, I could take those now.
So is this the change from what was in the packet?
These are this is a summary of the changes, okay. But the before and after is in the packet.
Okay, so
yes.
the current text is the same that's in the packet. Okay. Do we have comments and questions? Jeff?
Thank you. I do have some comments. I think that the new policy update is definitely making progress in distinguishing between profit and nonprofit events, closed versus public, and intensity of use. I think that's really what Council was asking for. I think a primary role of ours as commissioners is to help develop policies which reflect the spirit of the law and make sure that's consistent with the letter of the law. And actually, the SF Mime Troop is an issue that came up as a good example of that, and I look forward to talking more about that next month. With that said, I think there are some ambiguities remaining that I'd like to highlight, and I will be making a motion for some specific changes. First off, under 6C, I'd like clarification if this policy is intended to apply to the exclusive private use of part of a park, or is it exclusive use of a park or an athletic field? And I think the answer is that it depends on the scope, but a larger part of a park should be included as well. And I think if that's the case, then the current verbiage is ambiguous on that. Could staff provide an answer on the intent there?
I think it would apply, especially for large parks like, for example, Rinconada or Mitchell Park, that if someone was reserving half of a park if they requested half of the park for 2 weeks, this policy would come into play for that as well. So
sure, that makes sense to me.
That.
And so what I would suggest then under policy 6C, the first line, change booking an entire park site to booking a park site. And then a park site could mean an entire park or a larger part of a park, depending on interpretation. And then again, I believe the intent of this policy is to apply to both parks and athletic fields. And under 6C1, the first bullet, it's under the line of 6C1, it says exclusive use of parks or athletic fields, which is what we want. Then the first bullet says no exclusive use of parks by private parties. It doesn't include athletic fields. So I think if we omitted parks and had to just say exclusive use by private parties, then that would imply parks and athletic fields as stated in the line above that. I do support limiting the private use to 5 days as stated in the second bullet point. I think that's a good number. Under the third bullet, I have some concerns about the ambiguities regarding the community message and meeting requirements and the one-day threshold. And part of it you've clarified. So you're asking for noticing to be done for any public or any private event, even if it's less than 1 day. And I'm not sure that would be necessary depending on the scope of it. So perhaps we want the same 1 day threshold to apply to both the community messaging and to the community meeting. Regarding the community meeting, I think clarification on the timing of that needs to be made, and the verbiage now doesn't seem to mandate that it would be 14 days before the permit's issued. And I also think it's important to note that the public meeting should be before the permit is granted. And then finally on that same bullet, I'm not clear if the threshold for the private events lasting longer than 1 day applies to events reserved for multiple calendar dates or for more than 24 hours. So if someone reserves it from 3 p.m. on Wednesday to noon on Thursday, does this trigger this clause, which I think it should, in which case I think maybe we should call this, we can say that this refers to multiple days. Then council has requested a charging an increased permit rate as noted for private events. Right now the verbiage is cost recovery should be 100%. Is this my question is this the most that we can charge? Is that why that's stated? Or is there some other wording that would apply? And it also seems to infer that a new rate tier should be added, probably for the private event permit as opposed to a field permit. I don't know if that's implicit in the verbiage or we need to call that out. And I'm interested in staff's opinion on that.
So related to how much we can charge someone, that's outlined in the municipal fee schedule, which is approved by council. So that would be a separate action by council to revise the amount we can charge or to add another layer to a special event permit fee, such as a commercial use or some other language like that.
So if I understand your answer correctly, we're probably fine leaving it as it is, and council can take it up and revise that further when the policy goes to them as desired.
That's correct.
Okay. And then as far as the need to call out a new rate tier for this, is that implicit in the current verbiage, or do we need to add something for that?
So you're asking if this policy should include adding another rate category in the municipal fee schedule?
I think in the recent event that occurred, the one issue was that there was no appropriate rate tier for that event permit, and so that calls out the need to add a rate tier.
I think we could add it here, and whatever motion you make tonight, if you could include that statement in the motion that you recommend that there be an additional tier added.
Okay. I do have an updated policy which I've typed out, and I can forward rather than if that's easier than making a motion or reading this as part of a motion.
I think we have to read it just because it's an
We
action
do.
item. If this was a discussion item, then that might be better, but.
Sure.
Okay, so can you, well, let's go around, and if other people have comments on top of your comments, then we'll come to a consensus at the end.
Great.
Any more comments on this?
Yes, please. So beginning with the policy statement, it says events by outside organizations. I'm not sure what outside organizations implies. Is that organizations that are in Menlo Park or in San Francisco but not in Palo Alto? If organizations are voters, apparently, then an organization that's in Palo Alto is really not an outside organization. And I think even just calling out private organizations would be better, but I think outside stigmatizing in a way I don't think we want to do. I agree with many of the other comments that Jeff said. I think that private uses will be limited to 5 consecutive days. Again, because of the kind of organization that we're dealing with, I think it would be useful to clarify whether that includes weekends or not, because some of these organizations may say five consecutive days is Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Monday, Tuesday, because it's business days that they're implying, and I think we should clarify that weekends are included. I think the cost recovery item, I would at least want to say that the wear and tear on the facility should be not less than 100%, so that in fact it could be more than 100% under whatever terms we put in. And I also worry that at what point do we define what the wear and tear is? Somebody has a party, somebody spills something noxious, it's not obvious at the end of the party, but 6 weeks later all of the surrounding oaks die. How do we recover that? How do we define that? Is there some sort of mitigation? Is there some sort of deposit? Is there some sort of holdback on funds? I don't know how you would do that, but the whole cost recovery on wear and tear scared me in terms of what you would do. Thank you. And I don't know how you want to address any of that in your...
I think the change of outside to private is a good idea, and I would add that in regarding the first comment you made. Regarding the other comments, I think that could be. I think those could be handled by staff in the policy phase, and I'm not sure it's appropriate to include them in the master plan policy. Interested in staff's opinion on that.
Yeah, I had 2 comments here. One was the full park. It's not obvious to me right now. If you look, it says limit the exclusive use of Palo Alto parks. That to me sounds like an entire park. You should really have the same clarification there. Any part of the park that's currently not reservable is considered a private event. And the second, I wanted in the cost recovery to put in addition to cost recovery, including wear and tear in the facility, we also should be charging a market rate for the opportunity cost. But now your comment makes me think that we're not allowed to do that. I mean, if the market rate for renting a field in Palo Alto is X number of dollars, we're not allowed to charge that? We have a ceiling on what we can charge?
We do have a ceiling. In the muni fee schedule, there's a range of what we can charge for a particular rental.
And that's fixed in time, or is that?
No. So Yeah, Kristen's right, but that's reviewed every year by the full council, and so we can amend that. So you could include a program here that we look at amending the municipal fee schedule to add a higher rate for this type of activity. And we wouldn't say it just like that, but so that we can really charge a really premium rate if there is an impact to residents.
We're not forcing you to charge, be excessive. What we want is something representative, market rate, something that's fair, and we're not trying to squeeze people. We don't want to be giving away our assets.
Right. We can add that as a program here.
So, okay. So would we put that in that cost recovery bullet, or would we put it elsewhere? Should we say amend municipal fee schedule to
Well, Keith thinks about that for just a moment. Excuse me. I don't mean to interrupt you.
Yeah,
but,
please do.
is there anything else that's driving the logic behind the current language on cost recovery? I know that in the past there's been at least kind of a suggestion that the city shouldn't be recovering, or actually might be limited in recovering more than its costs. Is that what's driving this, or is there some other logic behind the current language?
And we would have to check with the city attorney's office to make sure that we're within sort of the legal bounds. But there are circumstances where we can charge more than the cost of a program, and I believe this is one area where we can do that. We'll obviously have to verify with the legal department before we take it to council for review.
Okay. I wonder, it's driven a lot of questions amongst this group. I'm not opposed to including it, but I wonder if just removing it might be a simpler way to go. Obviously, the city's fee schedule is going to apply.
Yeah, that's true.
I think it sounded to me like there was an interest, though, in staff exploring a way to ensure there is a premium fee charge for a private group that uses a significant portion of a park that has an inconvenience to residents, which we don't have in the municipal fee schedule currently. So I think the language could be to explore that and evaluate that and bring it to council for consideration as a program here, and then we would then work on that when we go through the budget process and get the municipal fee schedule approved next fiscal year. They could approve that. That gives us then the ability to charge that higher fee should something like this come up.
Yeah, and I have no objection or reservation to putting a hook of that sort into the master plan. I'm perfectly happy to see that there, but I think it's slightly different than the current bullet, which is the cost recovery one.
Right. How about if we add another bullet after that cost recovery that says amend municipal fee schedule to allow city to charge market rental rates for park facilities? Is that?
I think that might be too specific. I agree. I think adding verbiage and adding the language of charging a premium fee, which is at minimum cost recovery, and then leaving it to council to further add to that if they so choose to.
I would only argue that it needs to say fee structure as opposed to just fee, because I think that I would still be interested in something that says the fee is $10,000 and you have to deposit an incremental $10,000 that we might give back to you if you don't destroy the park. I'm really worried about the concept of when you say the wear and tear brought to mind. What if they spill something that kills all the oaks? And now we got to try and get money out of them as opposed to we already have the money. That bothers me.
Okay, how about amend municipal fee schedule to allow city to increase maximum fee structure for park rentals?
I'm not sure that we should be directing council to amend the fee structure. I think it might make more sense to indicate what kind of fees we're looking for, and then council can make amendments as needed to address that.
Do we need to do more than leave this concept with staff?
My only concern is that as we were looking for a motion tonight that would allow us to go to council and request that council adopt a master plan. So if it would be helpful if the commission could make a motion that included the specific changes and additions that we wanted or that you wanted to this policy.
Normally, I would say that this is something that staff could just take care of in the implementation, but the council is pretty clear about they wanted this included in the master plan. So I think we have to address this, which you have done, and part of this also is addressing the cost recovery aspect of that. So I think just because it's a council directive, we have to at least specify our recommendation. So maybe we're not directing council to do something, we're recommending the council do something. Would recommend be more palatable?
I'm not sure, I'm not clear how changing a fee structure for something is applicable to be in our master plan. It seems like the fee structure is outside of the Parks and Rec master plan, and so that's why I'm hesitant to include it as part of this policy.
We could, or you could propose language similar to what Rob said previously, that the program could start with explore. That's, I mean, I know the comprehensive plan uses that, but it would be explore updates to.
The comprehensive plan is full of explore and consider and whatnot, and I think that consider appropriate fee structure as a program in here under the policy would give you the wording that allows us to move ahead, but not be so specific that it sounds like we're dictating.
I can support that.
Okay. You want to propose language? Would you say consider?
Well, I would say just consider cost recovery, consider incremental or new or whatever cost recovery fee structures that address the risk of wear and tear on the facility. Something that.
But I don't think it's just wear and tear. I think it's opportunity cost too.
Right.
The
So
city can't use this park for a week. How much is that worth to us?
Right. So to tweak it slightly, and Don, jump in here, please, but perhaps consider fee structure adjustments that include but are not limited to cost recovery, parenthetical, including wear and tear on facility.
Yep, I agree with something like that.
Should this be part of the same cost recovery bullet, or are we first trying to indicate what kind of a rate tier we're looking for, and then separate from that, if changes need to be made to allow for this rate, maybe that's a separate item.
I think in my mind there's two bullets. One bullet is that we want to charge the maximum we can, a maximum that's appropriate, and the second is we should revise, or at least revisit the maximum that's set by the fee structure and see is that appropriate.
Chair, did you want to include in that last new bullet reference to market rates?
That's what my initial feeling was, but I don't think we should necessarily dictate that. We could say premium charge or increase the fee structure. I don't think it necessarily has to be market rate. That's okay. What's driving it is I think if we're going to rent out the facilities, we should be charging market rate. particularly if it's a for-profit entity.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that piece wasn't lost, but that
Yeah,
sounds,
I'm not wedded to market rate, but that's what's driving this desire.
okay.
So. Go ahead, David.
So when I think of the Palantir event, they gave $50,000 to the city, and they gave $10,000 to 2 different soccer clubs. And they may have done that out of the goodness of their heart, but in the future they may not. And so, so if they displace users, I want to. There has to be a significant price, and how do we make it so that what they paid is the least that they can do? So when you talk about market rate, I like the idea of a premium. I want you to have the ability to charge a whole lot of money. And I don't know how to word it. If you just leave this, Palantir can demand that we give them a public space for their use every year for 5 days for very little money. And I don't want that to happen. So I don't know how we can protect ourselves from can they demand that we give them that public space?
I don't think they can demand.
I can't hear you.
Sorry, I was just thinking. They can't demand that we give them public space, but one thought I had here is just an extra bullet that says, explore establishing premium deposits and fees for such use, which relates to the, all the language above. And then that gives us enough room to try and think this through about what kind of fee structure. Maybe it's a significant deposit if there is risk of trees or other assets in the area. We can discuss that through the year with the commission and have it part of the budget process as we update the municipal fee schedule. So that would be fairly simple. Explore establishing premium deposit and fees for such use. Seems to capture it, but I'd put it out there as something to consider.
And do we have to, if they say, sure, we'll give you the money, do we have to give it to them? Do we have to give them the public space? What if the reason you're notifying the neighborhood, do they have any say in this?
Ultimately, it's the city that has to issue the permit, and we're evaluating the impacts to residents and the community, and if we think that it's not in the best interest of residents, then we won't issue the permit.
Okay. What do people think of Rob's text? I'm happy with that if other people are.
I don't like premium as opposed to alternative, or something that doesn't start off with an argument.
Premium is kind of a loaded word. Can you think of a better one?
I would have used alternative.
Or increased?
I don't mean to be too lawyerly, but I agree with Don that if that is actually a concern, I'm not sure that it is, really. But if it is one, then I think you want to just be more ambiguous.
I guess we're saying we want the ability to charge a different rate. And that's all we're saying. Okay.
Well, but if it's a private organization that's a nonprofit, there may be if it's the San Francisco Mimes.
Although this only applies to private rentals, right? So this is
private multi-day rental.
We're saying explore. Yeah. So I would say increased or larger. We're not saying that we must explore whether we want to charge more for private people. We certainly would not charge less for a private corporation compared to nonprofit.
So let's use incremental.
Yeah, incremental or alternative, I just sort of think it does work. Obviously, this is something that council would approve, so we wouldn't be going forward with something that's less, or I think it works, incremental or alternative.
But what's the distinction between incremental and increased? I think increased is more, incremental to me is it's taking steps as opposed to we just want to say it's larger. Do you have a problem with increased or larger?
I like incremental.
You like incremental?
It's certainly fine by me.
Okay, we'll go with incremental then.
And Rob, did your wording, and what was the rest of your wording?
Explore establishing incremental fees for such use.
Deposits and fees.
Deposits and fees, sorry. Thanks.
Yeah, I think that's what I wanted to make sure is I think the idea that there's fees and deposits.
Okay, so let's roll this up. That's one extra bullet that we are adding after the cost recovery bullet. Jeff, do you want to outline in terms of a motion?
Sure. The one area that I'm not clear on is a comment that you made regarding the parks or part of parks. So my question is, if our first line is saying limit the exclusive use of Palo Alto parks, in parentheses, booking a park site or recreation facility for events by private organizations that are closed to the general public, is that sufficient to include parks and parts of parks?
No, I would say, or part thereof, I would add.
So where would you add that?
Okay. Where it says booking an entire park site or recreation facility or part thereof.
Yeah. May I ask for staff's opinion again? I think there is a distinction between renting an entire park and renting, a quarter of it, or renting a picnic area within a park for 3 days for perhaps a company's meeting of 50 employees for a 3-day period or something like that. And the impact to the community is much lower. So then the question would be, do you think that it's actually necessary to have the same requirements for that sort of thing? Maybe there's a simple tweak, which is just to say significant portion of a park, something like that. But
yeah, I wouldn't mind that. Significant portion.
okay.
So booking a park site, recreation facility, or significant part thereof?
Okay, how about in 6C, we just get rid of the word entire, and then when we go to 6C1, we specify.
I already was getting rid of an entire.
Oh, in 6C?
Right.
Okay.
So.
Okay, read what you have and I'll tell you if I'm happy or not.
Sure. Limit the exclusive use of Palo Alto parks, in parentheses, booking a park site, recreation facility, or significant portion thereof. Or wordsmith that last bit if you want.
I'm happy with that.
Okay. For events by private organizations that are closed to the general public.
Okay.
Okay, and then
6C1 you wanted.
6C1 does not change.
In this text that you have up on the screen, use the term private use, which I like better than exclusive use. So 6C1, do you want to start that with private use? Or are we losing something by?
I guess it gets down to the question of, does exclusive infer it has to be all of a park or not? But since in 6C we've stated that it can include a significant portion of a park, I think we're covered. So then I think 6C1 exclusive use means exclusive use of parks as we've defined it above.
So I would be...
Yeah, and I take it to mean essentially private events that are close to the general public. That's what I view as an exclusive use.
So in 6C1, can that first line, the whole first line, be deleted and just replaced with private events that are? Do we lose anything by making that simplification?
I actually think that saying exclusive private events as opposed to, there might be many private events that don't actually exclude the community.
Well, the next line says closed to the general public.
Do you mean in 6C2?
6C1.
6C1. The second line says closed to the general public.
I guess I'm interested in staff's opinion, but I think 6C1 works as written.
Ryan, do you have 6C1?
Including the bullets, or?
Just not 6C1, not including the bullets.
Okay.
Okay. I think it's wordier than it has to be, but I don't object to it. Okay, so 6C1 stays as is. Okay, now next bullet.
Okay, so first bullet, we're just crossing out of parks, so it says no exclusive use by private parties, etc. You want me to read the whole thing?
No, just first line, we're just removing of parks.
That's right. No changes to bullet 2. Bullet 3 is replaced with, for any multi-day private event, including setup and breakdown, notice of the private event will be made to the neighboring community and facility users a minimum of 14 days in advance. In addition, at least one public meeting will be held a minimum of 14 days in advance and prior to a permit being issued.
Is it?
Comments?
Do you have a comment on that, or is it?
No, we just didn't get all of that. Could you repeat it?
Oh.
Yeah, I would be happy to repeat it.
Thank you.
Maybe I can even get it all out in one effort too. For any multi-day private event, including setup and breakdown, comma, notice of the private event will be made to the neighboring community. Will be made to the neighboring community and facility users a minimum of 14 days in advance. In addition, at least one public meeting I have an extra copy of this.
Could you repeat that last
Sure.
part, please?
So the second sentence, in addition, at least one public meeting will be held a minimum of 14 days in advance and prior to the permit being issued.
So while you're on that point, I don't mean to be picky, but don't you run the risk of sending out a notice and holding the meeting on the same night? Because they're both 14 days.
I'm open to suggestions from staff.
Yeah, may I ask, in terms of, so long as the permit is issued after the public has an opportunity to provide feedback, does the 14-day timing for the meeting really matter? And my interest is just to provide the most flexibility to staff, and I realize that some of these things might, at times, be on slightly shorter notice. 14 days to me seems sufficient, giving the neighbors notice, and then if there's an opportunity to have neighbors give that feedback to the city before the permit is actually issued, I think that accomplishes the...
I'm open to any tweaking of the numbers. I was just trying to remain consistent with the policy as written by staff. So any change in numbers people would like to suggest, could be quite amenable to.
So typically, I think just best practices when you notice something for public either review or public notice, you then wait a period before you have your public meeting so people can digest whatever the topic is and also be made aware instead of doing it on the same day. But
so,
I think the numbers should not be equal. I would either say maybe 121 and 14 or 14 and 7 or something.
and do we need a notice to call the meeting and then another notice if the permit is issued?
I think that's excessive.
Okay.
What's staff's thought on the timing? Is 21 days advance notice excessive? Because
I don't know if it's excessive.
my
I
inclination...
think it's unlikely we're going to ever have a private event in our park, I can tell you that.
Yeah.
I wonder whether that's, there are unintended consequences.
The
Well, I agree that, this is putting quite a few hurdles in the process. And that is appropriate at some level, but at some level, it might be appropriate to allow some private events in parks. And actually, as we saw from the Palantir example, that generated a large amount of money for the city and some charitable donations to the affected user groups, who I think at the end of the day, based on what you'd reported, were actually happy with the way that things had worked out. So, I think there can be win-win situations, but I agree with you. We shouldn't, in these aspirational statements that go into the master plan, make it so difficult as to discourage any private use.
How about if we move the public meeting a minimum of 7 days in advance? That's still, most of these things are planned months in advance.
How about we put the wording in that simply allow for public input, because it really doesn't have to be a public meeting. It could be an online kind of survey or something, and that might be a lot easier. That there be flexibility as to whether there's a meeting or...
Yeah, I personally think that's better.
Suggestions for an amendment here?
I would put notice, let's see, be made to the neighboring community and facility users 14 days in advance. In addition, blah, blah, blah. In addition, vehicles for public input should be considered or something like that. In fact, why not just say facility users a minimum of 14 days in advance, allowing for public input?
Yeah, I think that.
Prior to a permit being issued?
Yeah, that's by definition, and,
Okay.
yeah, that's fine.
So let me read the bullet as I understand it. For any multi-day private event, including setup and breakdown, notice of the private event will be made to the neighboring community and facility users a minimum of 14 days in advance, allowing for public input prior to a permit being issued.
Right.
Perfect.
Okay. That works for me.
Okay.
Ann or Dave, do you? Okay.
Then I'm not clear exactly where you want to go on the cost recovery bullet and the additional bullet. If you want to propose something, I'm happy with that.
My only concern is the 100%. 100% of what? It's not obvious. Do we say 100% of the maximum?
I'm asking staff, is there any reason why we can't say wear and tear in the facility should be no less than 100%?
I think that would be fine.
Okay. And then, so that statement would be okay with the no less than, and then the cleverly articulated Rob DeGroot's statement would be the final one.
Do we need to add or include wear and tear on the facility? When we're talking about cost recovery, can we just say cost recovery should be 100%? It seems that by including wear and tear on facility, we're highlighting that and emphasizing that in contrast to many other factors that constitute cost recovery.
To me, those are the signal words that allow us to worry about, and people in the future reading this, to worry about wear and tear. As opposed to simply say, hey, the rate table says $1 an hour, so they paid $1 an hour, but they destroyed the place, and so this allows us to recover the wear and tear. I think it's important to have it there.
But does that emphasize it over the opportunity cost that was suggested?
But we were adding another statement.
Okay. All right.
Which I had as explore establishing incremental deposits and fees.
For such use.
I had for such use. I don't know if it's necessary because the other bullets don't have that, but get out of that.
Okay.
And for a master plan, I think that's a good statement, that it gives us the policy, the program that we should be incrementally recovering costs.
Should we include that as a single bullet then? Cost recovery, including wear and tear on the facility, should be 100%.
Should be no less.
Should be no less than 100%.
Yeah. And then also.
And then a separate bullet.
And then the next sentence, explore establishing incremental fees and deposits, or deposits and fees.
Okay.
Okay.
Kristen, you have a handle on all the changes?
We do.
Okay. Is there anything more on that? Okay, do you want to take a motion?
I'd like to make a motion to revise the policy 6.C in the final draft master plan as we've just outlined.
I would second that.
Okay. Any discussion? Or?
Do we need to make it clear that we're amending policy 6.C, including are the bullets in this programs, or are they just bullets?
So the 6.C is the policy, and then C1, C2, C3 are programs. So
Right,
any bullet that's under like C2
Right,
is
so we would
included in
need
that program.
to say policy 6C and program 6C1, to be clear, wouldn't we? Isn't that what we just did?
Correct. You could say a policy and its programs or.
Yeah, okay.
So moved.
So second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, passes unanimously. Okay, that was quite the sideline. Okay, back to the presentation. Do you have more?
We're not done.
Yeah.
You can't pass motions without listening to the public. I'm sorry. It's not that I have any problem with this, but that's not right.
Yeah, I think we may have missed a step there. We didn't fully finish the presentation, and after the presentation, you were going to go to the public, so it would be
Okay,
appropriate
so
to do
we
that.
will have that motion on hold, finish the presentation, public
Yeah.
input, and then we'll revisit that motion.
Yes, thank you for that clarification. So right now I'm going to turn it over to Barbara Beard, who's been waiting patiently for her turn to discuss the public comments that were received during the CEQA public review period.
Right. Good evening, Commissioners. As you know, the initial study mitigated negative declaration for the Parks and Rec Master Plan was circulated for public review from May 8th to June 6th. And the Commission held a public hearing on May 23rd to receive public comment. There was no public comment received at the hearing, but the city did receive 5 comment letters. Those comment letters were provided in your packet tonight. There was a letter from Caltrans, 3 letters from Santa Clara County departments, and 1 letter from the Santa Clara Valley Audubon Society. Each comment letter is numbered, and the comments within each letter is also numbered so that we can track the responses and provide documentation as to how each comment was responded to. We worked with city staff to come up with the responses for each comment and prepared written documentation that's going to be part of the CEQA administrative record that Planning Department will have. This also includes text edits to the initial study that are in response to the comments that received. And per the City Planning Department's normal procedure for initial studies, we prepared a final initial study mitigated negative declaration that shows text changes in red with strikeout and underline. And this document will be posted on the city's webpage for the project and will be presented at the City Council hearing. The text changes, I can summarize them very briefly. In response to the Caltrans letter, there was text added to the traffic section that was going to talk about the city's need to prepare a traffic control plan if construction of a park project were going to affect traffic or circulation on a Caltrans facility. And in response to Santa Clara County Parks Department comment, the legend for figure 4 in the initial study, which also is a figure in the master plan, was changed to indicate designated county-wide trails. And that was the comment the county parks people were hoping would be made. The County Environmental Health Department raised concerns about historic soil contamination and the potential exposure of workers and the public to future park projects that may disturb subsurface soil.
Excuse me, can I
Yes.
just ask a question? So in the package, you did a very nice job of providing us with the letters. And then as you pointed out, the letter, for example, from the county was divided into B1, B2, and B3. But in the package, you only talk about B2 and E1 and E2, I guess, or whatever. But now you're talking about some of the others. Is that right?
Kristen.
So the difference is what Barbara is referring to as changes made in the initial study document, and the changes that are called out in the staff report are changes that were made to the master plan document itself.
Okay, so
that's the difference.
So, for example, if I'm looking at A A6 or whatever, sea level rise, that's in the document from the Department of Transport, you acknowledge their interest, but you didn't change anything in the document, and that's why it's not called out here.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
And so every one of these organizations would have received a letter back saying, thank you for your input. Here's what we did about A1, A2, A3, or...
The way the planning department responds to public comment for initial studies is they come up with the city's responses. The CEQA guidelines do not require notification to the commenter of what those responses are. The text changes will be available to the public via the web page, and when the city council has the document in their packet, it will be part of the public record. The planning department also has our written responses for each specific comment, and they're going to keep that as part of the administrative record. So if you wanted to find out how the city was responding to the sea level rise question from Caltrans, the document that the planning department has would indicate that its comment is noted, and that should a park project be located in an area where there is going to be projected sea level rise, the planning of that project would incorporate the current guidelines for sea level rise projections. There's no necessary changes to the initial study text based on that comment, using that as an example.
Right.
Many of the Caltrans comments didn't require text changes to the initial study. They were, you would have to contact us if you work in our state right-of-way. You need your easements. You need to prepare traffic control plans. You would have to conduct whatever studies are necessary for hazardous materials, very routine kinds of comments, none of them requiring text changes. Is that a sufficient answer to your question?
Yes, I understand what you said. I'm not sure that in all cases not responding to the submitter of the letter, thank you for your letter, here's our response. By not responding, I'm not sure how polite that was, I guess is my... Thank you for your input. We're not going to do anything about it. Would have been a useful response.
Our approach to this has been guided by input from the planning department and also the requirements of the CEQA guidelines. So CEQA guidelines don't require written responses to commenters for an initial study, and planning department's normal procedures were not going to respond directly to them.
Thank you.
I want to make a comment. We are providing input to staff, but it's staff's responsibility to respond when necessary. So we don't have to respond to everything that is in that CEQA note unless you find something that doesn't agree with our plan. So we have to trust staff to provide the input to the different departments as necessary. So we shouldn't have to respond. We shouldn't have to respond to all of
I'm
this.
not expecting that we would respond. That wasn't my point at all. Thank you.
Sure. Okay. So if we were picking up where we were talking about where the text edits from the initial study are coming from, where they were made, we did respond to all the county departments' comments by adding text to the initial study. So we revised the legend to reflect county-wide trails. We added text to reflect the County Department of Environmental Health's concerns about historic contamination of subsurface soils. Their primary concern was historic ag uses. This would be, long ago, because the city has obviously owned and operated its current parkland for quite a long time. And we responded by inserting text that discusses the city's normal procedures for following existing regulations when you undertake a new project where there is going to be soil disturbance. you follow a certain set of procedures to identify whether you need to do a Phase 1 report, environmental assessment report, or any other subsequent soil analysis prior to the soil disturbance. If you're going to do a CEQA process for that project, that would fall under the CEQA process for a specific project. So we added text describing the city's normal procedures to address the comments of the County Environmental Health Department. The letter from the Santa Clara Valley Audubon Society, we made text changes to mitigation measure Bio 2, which discusses pre-construction surveys for nesting birds. And we added text to indicate that nest surveys should be done, well, excuse me, I'm backing up a little bit, to clarify the definition of an active nest, which includes a nest where fledglings are still using it, or where they're being fed in the nest or its immediate vicinity. So that would come into play if a park project was beginning or prior to its construction, a nesting bird survey is required by California Department of Fish and Wildlife regulations. And this definition of an active nest would tell the field biologists when it would be safe to allow construction if the nest was present. We also added language to Master Plan Policy 4A in response to the comments regarding impacts to park resources from increased access and from potentially allowing dogs on any new trails and open space preserves. And this sentence that was in that was added to Master Plan Policy 4A indicates that the protection of biological resources should be the priority in open space preserves. And that might have been part of Kristen's presentation and text in your packet. That sentence was added both in the initial study and in the master plan. And then finally, city planning staff made edits to the draft mitigation, monitoring, and reporting plan that was Appendix A of the initial study. And those edits focused on clarifying the responsibility for implementation and oversight of the mitigation measures themselves. And the changes would be indicated in the final initial study with red, strikeout, and underline. But you have the mitigation, monitoring, and reporting plan in your packet tonight, which just is the final language. It's not, the changes are not indicated in strikeout or underline text. And that was the sum total of the city's responses to the public comment, and sort of is the final step in preparing for the action that the city would like to take on the secret document.
So I would like to point out two other changes that were made to the master plan in response to public comments on the CEQA document, and those were in your packet and are also projected here on the screen. One was a reference to the countywide trails plan, and then another one, a reference to the city charter, Article 8, which defines parks and their limitations. And then the one that Barbara mentioned regarding the protecting open space preserves from visitor impacts. So I'm just going to quickly go over next steps. So tonight, the recommendation to the commission is for the commission to recommend that council adopt the master plan and also the mitigated negative declaration. We are planning on going to council on September 5th with that, and your recommendation will be included in our staff report to council. We will be asking council to adopt the master plan and the CEQA document on that date. And then from a procedural standpoint, the final notice of determination for CEQA needs to be filed within 5 days from the date that council adopts the mitigated negative declaration.
Tight schedule. Okay, let's go to public comments, and then we will have commission comments, and then we'll go to the vote. Shawnee Kleinhaus.
Thank you. Shani Kleinhaus, the Santa Clara Valley Audubon Society. I'm also a resident of Palo Alto. One thing about process, yes, CICWA does not require that you answer, that staff responds to comment letters, but many municipalities do. San Jose, for example, any letter that we send them, for any, whether it's a negative declaration, mitigated negative declaration, we'll get to see the changes that they make. And it's only right to do that because it's very difficult for me to try and trace all of this when I don't have it well in advance. And especially today, all of that should be available already for the public to review. So when you say, oh, all of that will be before the city council, it has to be now. That's what we're responding to. So I think this is a big misstep here from my perspective. And some of the other projects that we comment on do engage us in the, and I was on the stakeholder group too, so I'm very familiar with the plan. So if I have comments on this, I expect the respect of responding. I do have, and I appreciate changing the mitigation bio 2 on nesting. I do want to say that the theme of we care about nature was so strong throughout the process. At least half, if not more, of the people said, we care about nature. They never, the issue of, this was translated in the M&D to 5 categories: relax and enjoy the outdoors. That was not what people said. They said the words nature, wildlife, I want to see frogs. I care about those animals whether I see them or not often. People want to know that our nature is protected even if they don't have access. They do want access. But this is why I suggested another bullet on that, which was another need: conservation, restoration, enhancement of nature and wildlife habitat, and providing access to nature. It's not in the M&D. We have 5 other things, and the only one that kind of hints at nature is this relax and enjoy the outdoors. I don't think it's the same thing. It's not to me, and it wasn't to a lot of the people who participated in public meetings, comments online, several surveys, intercept events, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I expect to see something about nature here. You can consolidate the two, but it needs to be there. And the riparian corridor, I don't know why Palo Alto looks only at top of the bank and not at the tree, at the edge of the canopy. All the other cities, they look at whichever is greater. It's either the drip line, which means if you have trees along the creek, we look at the drip line of the creek, we measure 100 feet from there. In Palo Alto, for some reason, we're only looking at the top of the bank, which is where the bank kind of flattens out, so it's a lot narrower. I think we should look at other cities in that respect and go to drip line instead of the riparian, the 100 feet from the top of the bank. And where you have active recreation, like a lot of lights in a sport field or something like that, go 200 feet like San Jose does. They do a lot of study on that. So if we can get the same protections for Palo Alto creeks, a lot of them are concrete and it won't help a lot, but maybe some. One other thing in the new mitigation on visitor use, I think that's great, but I would talk about activity too, not just use and activity. I think use is a lot more general, but activity would be important to have there. It's hard for me because I don't have it in front of me. If I had the response, it would be easier to provide some language. Anyway, thank you for a long process. I hope one of you will make a motion to include the nature, the need of conservation, restoration, enhancement, et cetera, into the documents. And I think you should move it forward, although I would have preferred to not be on the spot like this. Thank you.
Yeah, I guess one comment I have is that we have a whole goal 4 that talks about protect natural habitat and integrate nature, natural ecosystems, and ecological principles throughout Palo Alto. So Yes. So I think overall, this is a very big document, and overall we've done a very good job. There's going to be some omissions that the wordsmithing isn't going to be perfect for everybody, but overall I think we've addressed all the issues. Okay, comments. Does anyone have any comments before we move on to the making the motion?
So,
actually, let's clean this up. Let's do the motion that Jeff had just before. Do you want to remove to have your motion? You don't have to read the whole thing. Sure. We just say as read before.
I'm looking for it. So I'd like to move to modify policy 6C and 6C1, program 6C1, as previously specified, with one minor change on the last line. I've cleaned that up a little bit to cost recovery, including wear and tear on facilities, should be no less than 100%. Explore establishing an incremental fee and deposit structure.
Okay, I'm happy with that. Do we have a second?
I'll second, but I thought we had those as two separate statements.
Oh.
My understanding is at the end we combine them into a single bullet.
Does staff have an opinion? If everybody's in agreement, I'll second the motion.
In my mind, it's two separate issues.
I don't have strong feelings
I
on
thought
that.
it was two separate issues. It was cost recovery and then incremental.
That's correct. It was
I thought it was two separate items.
My misunderstanding. Let's make it two
Okay.
separate bullets.
Okay, two separate bullets then.
I'll second the motion as amended.
Okay, any discussion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. So now, master plan comments, questions. And do you have anything?
Just a question. What do you expect when you go to council on the 5th? And it is the day after Labor Day, right? So.
That's correct. It is on a Tuesday. So I expect, or Rob, maybe you can chime in after me, but I expect there'll be discussion on policy 6C as amended. And one of the other comments that we heard from the mayor was he would like in the staff report some detail as to how we developed the list of high priority projects and programs. So we're crafting that language, and I expect there to be some discussion on that as well. I'm hopeful that they will adopt the master plan, whether they do that without a motion to, tweak some language, that I'm not sure, but I'm hopeful that the master plan would be adopted at that time.
So will we have any opportunity to review the staff report before it goes to the council? Or maybe it's not appropriate, maybe it's not necessary. It just feels like we've been all working on this for such a long time. And I know you're anxious to get it done, but we're all anxious to get it done.
We wouldn't typically have a commission review the staff report necessarily to council, but there is another meeting in August. We'll be working on that staff report. So you haven't.
But isn't the deadline for submission before the?
Well, it gets made public 10 days before the meeting. But to answer this question specifically, we wouldn't bring a staff report that staff is writing for council for a full commission
No,
review.
I understand that, but the tone of it, or maybe it's not appropriate. Just would like to know in advance, maybe, something about what you're thinking.
Well, we certainly can report on that and give you sort of an outline of what we're planning. And sometimes actually it's helpful with the presentation in particular to sort of do a little dry run with the commission.
That's
Good
all.
feedback for us, yeah.
Okay, David, do you have any comments? Don, did you have comments?
My experience in the in the comprehensive plan is it was number one, wordy, of course, but number two is repeating things in various places was sometimes important, and I'd like to support and actually make a motion that we add in 2.9.4 the statement that Shawnee has recommended in what is labeled as E2, which is conservation, restoration, and enhancement of nature and wildlife habitat and providing access to nature. That would be the first part of the motion. And the second part of the motion, or we can make it two motions, I do happen to believe that as a minimum, we should at least expand the riparian corridor to 100 foot from the drip line as opposed to the bank and even 200 feet for active recreation areas. So basically in the mitigation measure, add that from the drip line as opposed to from the bank.
I would second the motion.
Thank you.
So this is, you're modifying the master plan, or you're modifying?
I'm suggesting modification to the master plan. I'm suggesting modifications to the modifications that we've been presented with here. I'm not going back to the original, but
okay, so
what they've shown us tonight is a response to the input, and I'm asking that we further consider that input in the way I've suggested.
Right.
Can you repeat what you said?
Staff has a comment, I think.
Well, I'm ready to respond in a very general sense just for your consideration. The initial study exactly summarized what the needs and desired activities were as presented in the master plan. So the language of the project description in the initial study exactly matches the language in the master plan. So any potential changes to the initial study text related to a need would have to be made in the master plan. So it's not just in the initial study. The project description of the initial study is presenting master plan language, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it makes sense.
Right. And then
But why?
The whole needs section of the master plan is a very focused section, and if you read that carefully, the language that's suggested in comment E2 might need to be tweaked a little bit. We had a staff conference call about this particular comment and whether to add it or not, and at the time there was thoughts that some of the language was not necessarily reflecting a need, but also touching upon management, because it's calling for restoration and enhancement. So those are also management activities. And so the concept of the comment may be worth pursuing, but the language might need to be considered carefully so it fits that section well.
So it fits the needs section.
Yes.
Do you have a suggestion?
Not at the moment, since I'm focusing on the initial study and the whole master plan team has been working on this for years. I would defer to the master planning team. My comment also regarding the riparian corridor definition, the initial study uses the definition coming out of the comprehensive plan process. So the draft EIR for the comprehensive plan provided us a lot of language that we could use in this document. And so this document uses the definition of riparian corridor, et cetera, that's in the comprehensive plan.
Can I ask which comprehensive plan you're referring to?
The update, the draft EIR.
The newest draft?
That's not yet adopted, but
Okay, because there was a great deal of conversation in that. And I think, in fact, within the committee, the Comprehensive Plan Committee, the momentum was in the direction of much, much larger offsets relative to riparian corridors.
right.
But we're going back, I think this is going back to the wording that was in the 1986 comprehensive plan, aren't we?
The language that's used in the biology section to define riparian corridor, you're correct, is from the current comprehensive
Right.
plan. Right.
It's not from what I think is in the draft, or it certainly was intended to be in the draft.
Right.
I think in the draft it's much more aggressive.
And the reasoning for that, it came from the planning department, which said that current CEQA documents aren't allowed to use the draft language as adopted policy yet, until the new comprehensive plan becomes adopted.
So we could put in the master plan that the riparian corridors should be as defined in the Palo Alto current comprehensive plan.
We could.
And that would, assuming the current comprehensive plan addresses what I'm talking about. If it doesn't, too bad I lose. If it does, we get what's appropriate as opposed to the old one.
We could make that change, yes.
Then that would be my recommendation. Relative to the first one, the need, it says conservation and restoration and enhancement. If we change that to conserve, restore, and enhance natural wildlife habitat, is that not rewording it as a need?
I'm trying to find the needs section in the master plan.
Commissioner, did you have a page number that you were looking at there on the master plan? Or?
I don't. I would ask if Ms. Kleinhaus has a page number that she would refer us to, but I don't.
Page 11.
No, my page 11 doesn't have
That's
it.
not it.
No, that's not it.
I believe it's page 30 of the master plan.
2.9.4.
Starting with relax and enjoy outdoors,
Yes.
play for children, throw a ball, exercise and fitness, and gathering. So those are the needs identified in the master plan that were brought into the initial study.
So why can't we just simply say access to nature is a need? That wasn't in your list, was it?
That one.
Why can't we add access to nature as an additional need? Because I agree, certainly all our experience with comprehensive plan and everything else was nature was a big deal. And to not put it in there. And I think it's a big deal that's been much more sensitive today than it was 15 years ago.
So there is language on page 34 of the master plan that says additional geographic analysis evaluated access to experiences. These include the experience and preservation of nature.
Right, that was going to be my comment. That we spent.
Turn your mic on.
I have my mic on.
That was going to be my comment. The comment that Shawnee made is many, many places in the master plan and many programs and many policies. And I don't think that it has to be, I don't think you have to make the change here because it's all at many other places. And so I'm worried that we are changing the master plan that we have spent months hashing and rehashing at this very last minute. And I would rather see us adopt the master plan the way it is right this minute after months and months and months of hashing and rehashing than to nitpick individual pieces at this very late date.
I'll accept that argument relative to the need, but relative to the riparian corridor, I'd sure like it to have wording that was relative to the current comprehensive plan, where the effort went into that, which was also years of effort.
And that is a change that would just primarily occur in the initial study. wouldn't necessarily affect master plan text that I'm aware of right now. So that is a change that we could make before this goes to council.
Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, so there's no motion associated with that. She's going to.
I don't. Do you need a motion relative to that, or can you accept that? Can staff accept that as something that they will do for us?
I would approach it by developing a more robust response to the comment letter itself, which would be, what comment number is it? Comment E3,
Yeah.
and working that into the text changes of the final initial study.
Thank you.
That's
that would be.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm done.
Okay, Ryan.
So forgive me for not being sensitive to this previously when it was first inserted into the initial study in the master plan early in May. But I'm looking at program 4.8.1, and this is at page 65 of the master plan. And the added sentence, I certainly agree with goal 4 generally. I certainly agree with program 4.8.1 generally. But I'm a little bit concerned by saying that the protection of biological resources from visitor use is the priority in the open space preserves. I think it would be better to say a priority or a significant priority, but I'm worried about tying the city's hands in that manner, particularly when there are, other considerations that have to be brought into effect in every instance. So I would propose that we amend that to be, rather than the priority, a significant priority in open space preserves.
I agree with that. What's the impact if we make that change? Is it just simply a vote and you can go and edit it, or is there more ripples to that?
With respect to the master plan document, you can make a motion to change that. I don't know if it has an impact on the CEQA. I'll defer to Barbara for that.
The same change would be made in the initial study that would reflect the changes in the master plan. It wouldn't affect the analysis per se, and just be aware that throughout the initial study, the initial study document says that each open space preserve will have its own master planning process, and in that master planning process, you would develop the goals and priorities for that particular open space preserve. However, the Parks and Recreation Master Plan should be considered the big umbrella that all open space preserves are managed and developed under. So any guiding policies in this document should filter down into the individual open space preserve master plans as they are developed.
Thanks. So I'll move to amend it in that manner.
Okay. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay. Any discussion? Okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Can you state the revised language you would like?
It's just to change the priority in that added sentence to shall be a significant priority.
Thank you.
I oppose.
Okay. Yeah. So let's go back. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
I oppose.
Okay. So it passes 6-1. Do you want to explain?
I don't want any more changes to it.
Fair enough.
For me, threshold for the programs is lower. The threshold for the front matter, I think, is quite high. We should not be touching that unless there's something egregious.
I believe that this is going to be a living document, and we should be able to adjust the programs and actions over time without disturbing the overall document.
Okay. Any more comments?
No further comments.
Okay, Jeff? Okay, I have no other comments. So that moves us to making a motion to, okay, so I move that the commission recommends that the council adopt the master plan and the CEQA mitigated negative declaration.
So, can I ask a question before you do that?
Okay.
Excuse me. So, we've now had a motion to make one change. Tell me again why we shouldn't change the riparian corridor in here?
Is riparian?
Go back through your...
Is that defined?
It's not actually in the master.
So it's not in the master plan is your point?
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. It probably should be defined in the master plan, but at some point you just have to call day the day. Okay. Any discussion?
I'll second your motion.
Okay. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay. Passes 7-0. Okay. Do you have any more, or should we move on to the next item?
We're ready to move on.
Okay. Yes. We are an hour plus behind. Okay. So that was an action item. That was important to do right because it was an action. We still have a couple hours worth of work here, and let's try and trim down, really keep the questions to the minimum. These are all discussion items coming forward, so we will get another shot at these, but only major questions if possible. Okay. So the next we move on to the Highway 101 pedestrian bike bridge update design.
Keith, forgive me. Would it be possible to determine any community members if they're planning to speak on these discussion items, so that we could take them in the order that people are present here?
We have 2 people for this item.
Oh, we do? Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay. So we will have the presentation. After the presentation, we have 2 speaker cards, and then we'll move on to commission questions.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Megha Bansal. I'm project engineer with Public Works. And tonight we are providing you with an update on Highway 101 pedestrian and bicycle overpass project. From our team, we have Elizabeth Ames, Senior Project Manager, sitting in the audience. And to my right, our consultant, Roy Schnell from Biggs Cardosa Associates. Before we get into the details of design, a little background. Back in November 2016, Council selected certain elements of the project, including the bridge structure type, pathway width, and alignment for the project to meet the total project budget. And subsequently, we presented the design to the Commission back in March 2017 and to Architectural Review Board and Planning and Transportation Commission. We have advanced the design further based on input received in those meetings that we will be presenting to you tonight. But we would really like to focus on our discussion and get your input on certain elements, including overlook, refinements, trailheads, landscaping and habitat restoration, lighting, location of amenities, and location and type of signage. And with that, I turn it over to Roy Schnell.
Good evening, Commissioners. Could you go to the next slide? So this first slide is basically a project map that shows the areas for the individual elements that Megha introduced and shows basically the areas that involve. We'll start with a brief update on the overall project. So we're looking at placing a steel structure over the roadways, east and west Bay Shore and the freeway, with 8-foot safety fencing. The following access ramps will be concrete structures with a 4-foot safety railing. And over the confluence of Barron and Adobe Creek, we have a steel truss similar to the one on the other side, the existing one on the other side, that basically leads this path to one of the initial connections at the Adobe Creek Trail connection at West Bay Shore. One of the project elements that were included by council was an overlook, but they wanted something fairly minimal. So we looked at providing a seating area with a ADA accessible area in front. So this is basically a minimal approach to the overlook. Could you go to the next slide? We had a couple of design charrettes and some input from the various commissions and commissioners. We looked at some of the enhancements that could be made to make this area more functional. One of that was to expand the area to include bicycle storage areas so that it wouldn't clutter the space and make it less ADA accessible. And then the incorporation of art elements in architectural features like the benches and the railings at this location. We have 3 main trail connections. The first one is at West Bay Shore, located at the confluence of the sidewalks and the existing Adobe Creek Trail, which is currently closed to the public. The Water District is amenable to opening this up to improve safer access to this area. They've also are amenable to expanding the confluence area, the area that all of the traffic sort of meets at, into their right-of-way, and so we've reviewed an expanded area. Some of their conditions, from what we originally had shown, they didn't like the amenities at this location because they were fearful that their maintenance operations would run into the amenities and they would be responsible for having to replace those or update them. They also wanted a wider entrance to accommodate their vehicles. And then they also requested the addition of, at the end of that area, a 20-foot lockable fence so that when they were performing their maintenance operations, they could lock their maintenance vehicles inside the trail during those operations. The other end of the trail is at Meadow Drive, and we have coordinated with the Transportation Division in the city, who's also doing a bike project, a bike boulevard project in and around the area. And they've asked us to provide a raised crosswalk and some chicanes, which is similar to what they're providing in their project. So we've accommodated that at the East Meadow Trailhead. And then at the nexus of the Bay Trail and this project, we have the connection at the Bay Trail at East Bay, circa to East Bay Shore Road. One of the comments that we had originally received from this commission, the original alignment had a T intersection, and you had asked us to take a look at a possible revision to that to provide something that would improve safety, especially with the mixing of the pedestrians and the bicyclists. So we developed this roundabout idea, which is sort of becoming popular, especially in areas where we have bicycle and mixed use. And so we've worked with Payback and Transportation to sort of develop this configuration. We're still resolving some circulation issues and some sort of circulation questions, but this is the current approach for this connection that we're looking at currently. And then with regards to the landscaping, we're affecting 28 trees all on the West Bay Shore side. We're not able to replace all of the trees on that side. So we're looking to mitigate some of the tree impacts on the East Bay Shore side within the Baylands. And we're also looking at restoring some of the non-native areas that we're impacting, the non-native habitat areas that we're impacting with native grasses and native plant species. And then on the other side, we worked with the urban forester and the city landscape architect to identify some tree revisions to the other side to replace some of the trees that were impacting, some of the species of trees that were impacting with some more native plant species. With regards to lighting, the goal for the lighting is to minimize the amount of spillage onto the natural environments and still provide safe lighted walking paths. Most of the lighting is very low level. We have some areas with pole-mounted lights. Those are limited to the West Bayshore side and only on 12-foot tall poles. We've revised the pole standard based on some comments from the other commissions and are looking at more capped style lights that reach over the pathway for the pole-mounted lights to improve their efficiency and their look. All of the lights, most of the lights are mounted on the rails and railings, so they're fairly low level. And here's an image of what they potentially will look like during the day and night. With regards to the amenities, we've resolved to minimize the number of amenities and the locations of these amenities. So we're only looking at some fairly limited amenities. A hydration station, a bike rack at the a bike repair stand, and some trash receptacles. And we also have some benches. Go into the locations. They're located at two locations. One is the overlook, where we'll locate a bike, a bench, the benches, and the bike racks. And there'll also be some interpretive signs at the overlook that basically we haven't identified what the information is that's going to be there. And then on the Bay Trail, adjacent to the traffic roundabout, we're going to have a trash and recycle receptacles, the bike repair station, and then the hydration station. So these are the two locations basically where we have all of the designated amenities. With regards to signage, the sign on the top left is the standard that transportation is using for the bike boulevard project, and what they've recommended that we utilize for our wayfinding. One of the comments that came from the other commission was that it was very bike-centric and that we include some information with regards or some inclusion of the pedestrians. So in lieu of putting all that information, what they recommended that we put on the signs is basically direction, destination, and distance, and not necessarily the durations it's going to take to get there, because it's different for a bicyclist and a pedestrian, and it was getting fairly busy. The other thing is they asked us to look at custom trail options that included, instead of just the bike standard, included both the bicycle and pedestrian symbology. With regards to wayfinding, we've worked with transportation to get an understanding of what informational and etiquette signage, and we're going to probably use a combination of signs and pavement markings. And these are some of the examples that were delivered to us by transportation in coordination with Payback. They're trying to develop some standards for the city that are for these shared path situations. So these are some of the standard etiquette and pavement markings that we potentially foresee on this project. Now, with that, questions, comments?
And we are planning to come back to the commission with the park improvement ordinance in September. So I just wanted to point that out. Do we want to go over this previous?
The first slide,
yeah, the
which
first
basically
slide
shows
where
the project elements. These
yeah.
are the locations of
Locations of signage we wanted to highlight and wanted to get your input.
So currently we're looking at placing the signage at locations of decision making. So basically at all the trail connections and at the Y, and we're going to be basically limiting to those areas so we don't overpopulate the bridge structure with signage. And then with regards to pavement markings, similarly, we'll have you're envisioning pavement markings which are informational, basically to slow down the bicyclists in those areas where they potentially will meet with pedestrians.
Everything looks great. I only have one question, and that's the circle. So somebody's coming down from the bridge at full speed at night. Is there some way for them to see the circle? Is the circle flat or is it raised?
There's a little bit of a raise, but it's mountable. It's basically
so they could come right off the bridge
and
go right on top of it and not crash.
Well, you might crash into the fence that's on the other side of it, but you can drive. We had originally a more substantial curb, and transportation gave us this curb detail, which is basically a mountable curb that they're using on some of the other traffic circles in the city.
Okay, that's all I have.
Can you explain that more? So this is the curb around the inner circle.
Yeah, there's a detail for it so we can actually see what it looks like. So you see the image on the left. It's basically an inch high where it meets the pavement, and then
this is the tan portion or beige?
The white portion, yeah, the beige portion covers that detail that's on the left. So you can see the curb.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's clear.
Do we want any curb at all there?
We're still discussing that with transportation. If you don't put a curb there, people will just go across it, and so the question is, how do we make it functional and not force people to cheat? And that's one of the things that we had sort of discussed was the circulation issues. That's one of the circulation issues because they feel like some people will try to cross on the other side, and that will decrease safety instead of improve it.
Yeah, exactly. If you could just make it rough so it's not pleasant, but in a curb I think seems like a safety issue, but there's experts in the field that can have more
We will
insight.
also have some trail etiquette signs there.
What?
Trail etiquette signs at
Right.
the circle.
Yeah, on all three corners,
corners.
we'll have trail etiquette signage to remind people to be safe. Thankfully, you guys have a very informed bicycle community, and a lot of those guys self-police, so it's pretty good.
Yeah, that's
Done with the presentation. Okay, we have some public comment. Okay, we have Shawnee Kleinhaus, and then followed by Jeff Saunders.
Good evening, Shani Kleinhaus again. I wanted to thank staff for a very, very extensive outreach to the community, getting a lot of comments, sharing the process with us. I think that was a very, very good process, and that's all. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And Jeff Saunders.
I like the way that this is evolving. I think it's great. Keep moving forward. I want to continue to raise awareness to people that after this is done, we should look ahead to extending this to Sterling Canal to take the bicycle and pedestrian traffic off of West Bayshore up to Greer Park. Also, looking at this design, I had one question about the trail intersection at Meadow. So if bicyclists are going along Meadow, there's nothing really south of there. The trail would go along behind Laurel and Kehela High School, and then it kind of dead ends. So I'm not sure where that would go with that raised sidewalk going across. But bicyclists shooting out onto Meadow might encounter traffic, so it might be a good idea to put a barricade there so that bicyclists can't go directly out into traffic. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We're done with public comment. Commissioners. Jeff?
I think it's a really great plan. Just a quick question. The one concern that I do have is just I think it's going to be heavily used. I think it's in a great location. It's a great idea. So the usage and the mixing of bicyclists and pedestrians, so obviously the importance of signage, of etiquette, and whatever we're painting on the pavement. Quick question, and I'm not sure, is it wide enough that you could have designated bike lanes and designated pedestrian lanes, which it probably is not, but I'm curious about that.
When we first looked at this, one of the options was to look at dedicated bike and pedestrian lanes, but that required a fairly wide structure and was fairly costly, had more environmental impacts. So council selected the option to provide as much width as they could, but not dedicated lanes. So basically the bicyclists, when they would have to pass, would probably have to go to the open lane or slow down before they could pass. And so.
Okay, and then my other comment would just be, I'm not sure if the bike racks that you showed here are the ones that you guys intend to use. To me, they look aesthetically very pleasing. They don't look super functional to lock up different types of bicycles. That'd be my only comment.
Yeah, and we're still working out the kinks with regards to the bike racks. So we did include, that was the one that the architect selected as it evoked some of the same sort of things that they wanted to evoke at that location. I think we still need to work with transportation because they have some very, very good ideas with regards to what's functional in the city with regards to the bicycle racks all over the city. So.
Okay, other Jeff.
Thank you for a very comprehensive plan, and as I've said before, there's lots to like about it, and I like the addition of the roundabout, and the bike pedestrian dual signage is a good step as well. My primary question and comments center around access to the western approach to the bridge. In looking at the plan, it's very difficult to figure out what the intended paths are for bicycles and pedestrians from the various access points. Within the presentation, the trailheads slides helped that a lot, but they weren't included in the packet. I think it would be very helpful to have a table set up that talks about the various ingress, egress points to the western approach. So we have from Bayshore, on West Bayshore, we have the northbound and southbound approaches, and then we also have the East Meadow approach or access to the Adobe Creek Reach Trail. Then a question which I asked previously, which I don't feel I have a clear answer to, is what happens when there's a maintenance closure from Santa Clara Valley Water District? What is closed, and then what are the new recommended paths from each of these 3 points, or really applies to 2 of the points. And then included in the table should just be a clear explanation if a pedestrian just wants to walk along along Bayshore without accessing the bridge, make it clear where they're going in and out. So a question I have is, which I think I understand, but on westbound, on West Bay Shore, when you are southbound, pedestrians would access from one point on the ramp, but bikes are not intended to go on that ramp. Bikes are intended to continue on the bike path to the second intersection point. So there's really two intersection points on the west side.
Yeah, that's correct. And the access ramp, the pedestrian ramp at the Y, was basically we wanted to. There was a desire to put a staircase, a secondary access point there for providing easier access or closer access for pedestrians, and also for fire response. We looked at the staircase, and the ramp option had so many advantages to it in continuing the sidewalk and some of the other things that putting the bike lane back into sole use on the street from a safety perspective, that we went towards the ramp option. But yeah, we're not going to exclude bicycles from using it. Bicycles have to dismount though, and so there'll be dismount signs. So if bicyclists do want to use that path as a secondary path access, they can do it. And we made the path wider than a standard sidewalk to accommodate.
So if a table could just be set up that explains all these details, I think that would be a lot clearer when someone's looking at the plan trying to understand it.
And then with regards to maintenance, we're still working with the water district as to the requirements. Currently, what they want is when they do their maintenance every 3 to 5 years for several weeks, their plan is to close the trail and to provide and to lock their equipment behind inside of the trail during those periods. They typically don't utilize this area as often as the area on the other side, so we don't think it's going to be used as often as they think that is, but it's probably going to close the trail for that duration. That area in front where pedestrians, that'll continue to remain open, and that wider area where bicyclists can turn around will still be open.
So when the trail is closed, then northbound traffic, which is basically on the sidewalk on West Bay Shore, would continue up and would be able to access.
They'd have to take a left into that area and then to that trailhead and then go up that, which they can do now. And transportation has asked us to put bicycle markers similar to what's on the other side to indicate even currently when we finish the project that bicyclists will be allowed to do that. We just feel that more bicyclists will utilize the Adobe Creek Trail because it's safer.
At the 15% presentation, there was a question about whether that access point would even be open for bicycles and pedestrians, and with the potential that they'd have to continue down to the ramp.
Yeah, we're continuing as we meet with the water district, we're continuing to get more and more definition on the limitations of what they want, and so at some point we're going to need to start negotiating maintenance agreement type and cooperation agreement type information. So that'll get more solidified as we get closer to those conversations.
That seems pretty critical to sort out.
It's all in their right of way, so we're trying to get as much as we can, and we're also trying to negotiate early access to the trail, as one of the commissions wanted to access that earlier.
So between the new Adobe Creek Bridge and the trailhead where the Adobe Creek Reach trailhead meets West Bay Shore, is that just a single path, or is there any? There's no sidewalk besides that. That access path is the only way to move along.
No, there's sidewalks. Could you go to that slide? So our project will widen that sidewalk which is not existent right now, and basically put it into that trailhead. And then there's an existing sidewalk on the other side. So there'll be a continuous sidewalk on both sides of their opening.
So this is south of the bridge. There would be a sidewalk.
There is an existing sidewalk there that
Right.
basically ends at the current Benjamin Lefkowitz underpass connection.
So there will be both a sidewalk and the path, which is connecting to the the bridge.
Yes, and it'll widen there for the combination of pedestrians and bicyclists on the other
That's
side.
real hard to see in the current
It is.
drawings.
Yeah.
Okay, and then last question to
That's not
move
it.
on. The 20-foot lockable area, is that intended to be on the reach trail?
Yes.
Okay,
yeah.
so that's why the reach trail is closed.
We located it further back so we could get that space as wide as we can and as big as we can, based on what they were looking for, and then they want to have the ability on both sides to lock the trail up, prevent access during those maintenance operation periods.
Okay, thank you.
Just a few comments. The last time there was a presentation here, my question was, had there been any attempt to create a use case? The document says the facility may be used for both commuting and recreational. Do we have any idea at all of, is it 50-50? Is it intended to be 80-20? How will we know we've been successful in the end if we don't have some sort of estimate? And
we tried to approach that right after the last. I think we're still trying to get our arms around how to do that with regards to evaluating. We've asked transportation to give us some information with regards to how to understand the overall use.
you may want to even have just maybe 3 cases, 50-50, 80-20, 20-80 or something, because a lot of the questions that are being asked about access and whatnot, the answer almost depends on, well, you're talking about commuters in spandex or whatever, are you talking about, a biker with a trailer behind with kids in it? The answer almost depends that. Even the question of the outlook and
yes.
So I think you have to force yourself at some point to be able to say, we're estimating this use case. You don't have to be right in the end, but I think we really have to consider that.
Yeah, and I think we've considered, because we've heard from basically a number of those users, and we've heard from the commuters, we've heard from the recreational users, and we've heard from the moms who are carting around their trailers. And so hopefully we've accommodated all of those uses and usages in this plan. But I thought and forgive me for not understanding, I thought what you had originally asked for was in regards to the signage.
Oh, I think just signage is part of it. I think that's what instigated the thought, but my thought is throughout the whole project, access, signage, outlook, even the roundabout, all of those things, I think we should have some understanding of what is it we're expecting. Even if you look at what you've got now and say, what we ended up with is good, not necessarily good for everybody. I like what you said, that you've asked everybody and you've tried to get all the points, but I kind of doubt it. I won't push that further, but I appreciate that you remembered, and I appreciate you continuing to think about it. The one picture that shows on the east side at Bayshore, where there's all that vegetation habitat, I think that's very important that it be habitat. I think the fact that it says, I didn't, yeah, I like habitat restoration. Somewhere else it says landscaping.
Yes.
I think considering its proximity to the baylands, habitat restoration is more important than landscaping. And the other thing I would worry about here is if we're going to put native plants in there, what we run the risk of is that nearby are all sorts of invasive species that have the opportunity of immediately getting into this restored habitat area. And I hope that that's taken into account, that it's not just the immediate area, but maybe there's some proximity that we have to worry about in order to preserve our restoration.
To respond to that, we are working with stakeholders and with our biologist and landscape architect and arborist, and we will come up with a plant list that will be suitable for that area.
Yeah, all of the planting. I hope that all the stakeholders get considered. What used to be Actera is now
Grassroots
Grassroots.
ecology,
Thanks.
yeah.
I hope that they're included. I hope that the Audubon people are included, maybe environmental volunteers,
Yes.
which are near. I hope they all get included. My other comment would be about the lighting. It just seems like there's an awful lot of lighting, and I'm not sure what's too much and what's not enough. But one of my questions would be, is the lighting, would the lighting be on all night, or would it be a triggered lighting? So
No, the plan is to have control systems, and there'll be occupancy sensors. So when there's no occupants utilizing the pathway, the lights will dim down, and as it senses occupants, it will raise, and we're still working out for how long and what duration those are. But the plan is to include systems, control systems for the lights.
Great, thank you. My last comment would be, as we move forward, and we're all obviously enthusiastic about moving this forward as quickly as possible, I would sure like to see something like complete 35% design, which now says fall of 2017. As we get closer, I'd like to see that become a month. Can we say October? Can we say November or whatever? Fall could be any time between September and March of next year. And the only problem with having a quarter, a fiscal quarter or an annual quarter as a measurement device, when you slip 3 months, you really only slip 1 quarter, so it's not a big deal. Whereas, anyway, you get my point. But I'd sure like to see us get
Project
more
delivery
granular.
is very important. We've heard it from every commission and a number of the community. So we are dedicated, both staff and project team, to trying to expedite delivery. It's not, some of those things are outside of our control. That's why it's sort of a seasonal thing, because we're still waiting for we still have to wait for CEQA clearance and environmental clearances to occur. And that date hasn't been completely solidified yet.
If I wouldn't slow you down by asking a bunch of questions, you can get there faster. Thank you very much for what you're doing.
Okay, thank you, David. Ann. Okay, I just have a couple questions. First, West Bay Shore I just think is a mess. I mean, it's not your design, it's just that's a bad situation.
Yeah, it's not ideal. There's just not a lot of space to fit anything that is better. And so we've really...
I mean, can we have dedicated like a crosswalk or marked areas? Because
I've discussed some of we put a lot of thought into it, because we struggle with the same issues, us in transportation, and we sort of worked out what would be best in that. We talked about, potentially raise crosswalks here too, and so they felt it was leaving it as minimal as possible was going to be the best
right
solution.
At that corner is just such a bad situation. Could we slide it down and have the crossing, the people who have to cross West Bay Shore, have that further north where the ramp comes down, and have the crossing there, and make that a bike path coming up the ramp as opposed to pedestrians? It's just...
I'm not sure how to make that safe, because the southbound bicycles have to make a fairly large U-turn, and trying to do a sharp turn like that closer to the ramps might not be ideal. And then The northbounds have to make a left turn. The street is pretty tight with regards to the traffic. The traffic's going pretty quick in that area.
I don't want to belabor it.
Yeah.
I agree with Jeff. We have to really look at how people are going to get to that west crossing. And there's kids. Kids are going to be crossing using this bridge to go down to Baylands or going over to Twister's Gyms. There's going to be kids here, and I really feel uncomfortable with that corner right there. It's just a bad situation. But you know that.
Yeah.
We need to work that. Bike racks on the overlook. I don't understand. Is this? I don't see anyone locking their bike on the overlook. I can see them maybe stopping for a minute or two.
What we had originally planned was the bikes would just be leaned out on the rails. But as we looked at the spaces with the architect, they tended to clutter the areas that were available for the ADA ramps and access points. And if they put it up near the bench, we only had 4 feet between the bench and the railing, so that's basically the ADA minimum. If somebody put a bike there, we would basically be non-ADA compliant. So the thought was to identify an area to store bikes, whether that's a bike rack or just something that's sticking up where bikes can be leaned upon. We just wanted to identify an area that was more functional to keep it away from access points and in front of the benches.
I just think it'll be used more often for strollers and things like that. And having bike racks in there will make it harder, make it less usable, I think.
Okay.
I like the benches on the overlook. The seniors and other people, they need that break. If we can get another bench over on the West Bay Shore side, somewhere, it doesn't have to be right at the stop, but somewhere in that general area near the Reach Trail, a bench just so people can rest. For someone who's elderly, that's a long hike. You're going up elevation and over. We don't view the world through the elderly world through our eyes. We ignore that. So we need benches for the elderly. Yeah, that's good enough. There's no staircase on the east side. That's been deleted?
That's been replaced by the access ramp.
On the east side?
On the east side, no.
There's none. Okay. It'd be nice to have, but not required. Okay, thank you.
Just leave it alone.
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate your work. We're a little rushed to catch up here, but it's good work. I'm looking forward to having it built. And you said you plan to come back in September for the PIO?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you very much for all your comments.
Okay, and then let's move on. We are still behind schedule. Dog park, Peter Jensen is going to talk that. Again, this is just a discussion item. We'll come back for a PIO later, so try to get the highlights for your questions.
Good evening. I'm Darren Anderson with Open Space Parks and Golf, and I'm with my colleague from Public Works, Peter Jensen, landscape architect, and we're here tonight to discuss with you the draft design for the Pierce Park Dog Park. I'll briefly discuss the background regarding how we got to where we are at this point, and then I'll ask Peter to walk you through the key elements of this draft design. The background is that in December 2016, we hosted 2 community meetings that was discuss the option and collect feedback from the public about the idea of putting a dog park in either Pardee or Pierce Park. And the outcome of the first meeting, which was Pardee, there was a number of concerns and a lot of opposition to the concept for a number of reasons, but one of the predominant ones is the location we were forced to use was so close to the residents' house lines. There was concerns about impacts to those homes and privacy and noise. And the week later, we had the public meeting for Pierce. It was much more positive reception to the idea, very little opposition. And after we analyzed a little bit some of the, in addition to the feedback, once we started looking at design, there was enough space at that site to have a 0.72 acre dog park, very, very large and considerably larger than the options at Pardee. In addition to that, you have the ability to place it right along the train track side. So the noise issue gets mitigated to a great degree because you already have the trains. At the March 2017 Commission meeting, the Commission expressed support for the concept for proceeding with adding a dog park at Piers. Staff has done so. We created this draft design using feedback both from the Commission, from the ad hoc committee, from our public meetings, and prior public meetings going back several years where we have notes about things people wanted. For example, separating big dog, small dog. And I'd add to that we've also learned from staff experience of the 3 existing dog parks we have and what's working and what's not and what elements we should add. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Peter to walk you through the elements of this draft design.
Good evening, Commissioners. Peter Jensen, Landscape Architect for the City of Palo Alto. Like Darren was saying, the park is advantageous to having a dog park. I think one of the difficulties with locating a dog park in our current park system is actually dedicating that large of space to a specific use as a dog park. Turns out, though, that Piers Park does, though, have an optimal place for it. As Darren was saying, there is kind of an unused buffer that's in the rear of the park that's up against the Caltrain tracks there that supplies a good space that is sort of a pseudo dog park in itself right now that's just basically a not fenced off well. So the graphic that you're seeing up there is basically the red outline is the proposed location of the dog park. This graphic is more of a construction document, but basically what it starts to do is define the spaces between the large dog park and the small dog park. So this basically line is the dividing. The smaller location, the longer linear part of it is the small dog park, and then the location up behind the tennis court that has a little bit more of a larger open space for larger dogs is the larger dog park. A few other amenities. Really the main point of the project is fencing and defining that area. So the idea would be to start to use a black vinyl clad chain link fence in that area to mitigate the chain link as much as possible. It is 5 feet tall. One of the feedback that we heard along the way is the double entry gate to each zone. So the small dog and the large dog would have this the setup where you basically would have 2 gates. There would be a space between that would allow dog owners to collar their dogs before they leave the dog park. Water bowls for the dogs as well, or dog drinking fountains, picnic tables that are dispersed loosely through the dog park that allow kind of some flexibility and movement of seating out there, and then maintaining the surface area out there. Most of it is grass, but there's areas of mulch as well, and I think having that diversity of actually surface material works out very well for the dog park itself. There is flexibility in the plan. There is a sliding 12-foot gate between the 2 dog parks, so if it's seen one day that maybe it's just better to have the whole space as just one dog park, we do have the opportunity to do that as well, and give us some flexibility of using that space. There will be new concrete walks specifically just adjacent to the tennis courts that connect the existing concrete walkway then to the main entries of the dog park. So there's easy access from those locations. In a nutshell, that's pretty much it. There's not too complex about a dog park. We're basically just defining an area. I think we'll move on and take questions. I think our goal is, and going back, this is the setup in the seasons again as far as schedule goes, but most of it is definitely concentrated right now. So we would like to get feedback from the commission, of course, but we would like to start to put a construction document together, bid it out, and actually get a dog park installed. I think the dog park goes back way before even I work here, maybe a decade or more of trying to get a dog park in Palo Alto. So we're very close now, and I think let's just get to the finish line. It would be great. I know the dog owners are very eager to have a dog park, a new facility that we don't have yet, especially in the north of Palo Alto, which does not have a dog park currently.
And the only thing I'd add to that is if the ad hoc, who's been so generous with their time and support, had anything to add, now's maybe a good time.
Yes, I do. First of all, I'm excited to see this. I think it's great. I'm glad we have the money for it now as part of the CIP. I'm disappointed and dismayed at 2018 in the wintertime. It just seems like a really long time from now, and it would be great if we could accelerate that somehow. And I know there are processes and all of that, but I think that we'd really like, it's been 10 years. So it would be great if it could go faster than that. Specifically about this particular dog park, it's a great location, and I think there's a lot of good work done on it. There was some questions about the budget and if there were opportunities in the budget for the dog owners who offered at a number of community meetings to support the budget, and maybe we could identify some of those places and have a vehicle to raise the money and all of that. So can you think about that and maybe the ad hoc can think about that as well? And then two other questions independent of that. In the last report, there was that discussion of the public art in one of the parks, and there were restrictions on the public art, so we couldn't have a dog park in a place that you thought it might be good. Can we find out really specifically about what that kind of restriction is? And then secondarily, the whole issue of the trees, the dog urine underneath the trees, and that kind of tension, because it's, I think, limiting the places that we can put a dog park. And then the last thing is, what's the next dog park on the list? Thanks very much. It's exciting.
I'll be very brief. Thanks to Darren and Peter for pushing this forward. I agree that it would be great to have it constructed as soon as possible. I know you will work towards that. So please continue to push. Thanks.
I'm sorry, I'd like to make a couple of quick comments. I was recently spent a bunch of time in New York and followed around all the dog parks in New York. And one of the things they didn't do is they said there was a mixed dog space and then a small dog space. It wasn't big dogs and little dogs, so that people could say, it's my option to take my little dog into this space. And I think that might help us going forward. They also, we talk about dog water bowls. They were much more aggressive in terms of, fountain space and whatnot. I don't know if we can approve that, if we have the budget for that or not, but I would encourage that we be more aggressive than just water bowls. It also says picnic tables for seating. Are those picnic tables inside the dog area, or are those the existing?
No, they're inside.
Why would it be picnic tables as opposed to benches?
The picnic tables, I guess they can sit loose without being tethered. A bench would need some type of pad or to be attached to. So we felt just for the space itself and having the flexibility, and because of the terrain out there right now of the grass and the mulch, that picnic tables would work well, but we can look at benches.
My other comment is concrete paving. In so many of our projects, we immediately say concrete paving. I'm not so sure, I was over there today, and I'm not so sure that you couldn't put some ADA kind of path in that was just simply hardscape of some kind that wasn't concrete. And I'm not sure more concrete in our parks is necessary. I would discourage that.
We're at El Camino Park. They have that concrete that at least is water
permeable.
Yeah, I think that's important. I would also, in terms of the schedule, I would wonder if there's some way to phase it. It's not a big project, but I was over there today, and phase one is that the tennis court is the current dog park. I'm sure you're aware. I was there, 6 dogs inside the tennis court, having a good time, and it wouldn't take. It would seem to me that it wouldn't take much to put up a fence quicker and get even one part of it so that it was available, and we started to have some experience with it. I agree with Commissioner Gribb that that the fall of 18 or the winter of 18 seems like a long way away to put up some 5-foot fence. And I realize we're minimizing all of the other issues, but I think that's important. I was worried when it said picnic tables that meant the picnic tables that are already there. I do think that any access that we can provide that doesn't encroach on the current picnic tables is probably a good idea to keep them safe.
I support all the comments to reduce the timeline. But good stuff otherwise.
Okay. The biggest holdup, I understand when you have construction put out for bids and stuff, but the planning, what exactly is the planning doing? It's checking ADA compliance and other things like that, but...
Yeah, they'll end up doing environmental review as well. So there may be an initial study that's required. We'll see as we go through the process. Originally, we were looking at a longer process even, so it can be onerous. So you see on this revised staff report, it says up to 4 months, and that was some good negotiation and convincing on Peter's part as we negotiate with the staff and the planning department to see if we can't expedite as our ad hoc and commission has advised in the past. So we're going to do our best to drive it forward.
Okay, yeah, it looks good. I think it's a great place for a park. I think it's nice and long. They'll be able to get speed up. I think it's really good. So, thank you for your work.
Thank you.
Okay, let's move on to the next item. Update to Cubberley Community Center Master Planning.
Kristen O'Kane, Community Services. So we added this to the agenda in response to a request to have the draft scope of work be sent to the commissioners. So we decided to just put it on the agenda. There's no action tonight. It's just an update on what we are doing with the Cubberley Master Plan process. Just a brief background. As you probably know, the city owns 8 acres of the Cubberley site, and the school district owns 27 acres, which the city then leases. The Community Service Department operates the entire facility, including the athletic fields, as the Cubberley Community Center. The current lease will expire in December 2019. Included in the lease agreement is a provision that the city and school district will jointly develop a master plan for the entire site by the end of the lease term. In March of 2016, both city manager Jim Keene and Palo Alto Unified School District Superintendent Max McGee signed a Cubberley Futures Compact to demonstrate the two entities' commitment to collaboratively plan for the future of the 35-acre Cubberley site. Since then, both staff from the city and the school district have been working together to develop a scope of work. The scope of work was developed jointly by city and school district staff and has been reviewed by Superintendent Max McGee and his staff as well. The intent of releasing this request for proposals is to enter into a professional services agreement with a consultant who is experienced in creative and effective public engagement and design thinking, who can assist the city and school district staff in an efficient master planning process. Staff presented the scope of work to the Policy and Services Committee on June 13th, and the Policy and Services Committee approved the recommendation, which was for council to direct the Community Services Department to release a request for proposals for a consulting firm to assist the city and school district with master planning of the Cubberley Community Center. They added additional language, which was including a negotiated cost-sharing agreement, and that the negotiation will not cause a delay to the RFP. Following our presentation to Policy and Services, the school district staff presented to the School District Board of Education, and they also expressed their support for embarking on this RFP process. They did, the scope of work that we presented to Policy and Services was slightly revised between that meeting and the Board of Education meeting, And those changes are identified in the At Places memo that was provided today. Majority of those changes were with respect to the school district's position on their 27 acres of the Cubberley Community Center. The next step is we are planning on going to council on September 5th and requesting that they direct staff to release a request for proposals for a consultant. And this would be a joint effort between the school district and the city to start a master planning effort for the combined site.
Okay, that's it?
That's it.
Okay, do you have any questions? Jeff?
Is the joint effort to be joint funded?
The intent, yes, is for us to put together a cost-sharing agreement that would be funded by both the city and the school district.
And is that going to be 50-50, or is that still up for negotiation?
It's still up for negotiation, but the initial discussions have been that it will likely be 50-50. It's not for certain yet. We need a completed agreement, but that's,
because
I believe, where it would be going.
I could see some of the trade-offs wanting more recreation if we wanted swimming pools or things like that. And the school district may not want that. So I can see if the bells and whistles may end up being on the city dime just because they're city needs. But, well, I'll wait for my turn. Is that it? Okay. Don, do you?
Yes, I do. Is there an option B so that if it's not a joint project, or is the study going to be about a joint project and all of a sudden the demographics change or the landscape changes or the school district wants something different? Are we back at square one in 5 years, or is there something that we're thinking about that could be option B, where we just develop the city just develops the land that's available to us?
So our goal with the master planning process is that the school district will still retain their 27 acres and will retain our acreage, 8 acres. And the intent of the master plan is to have the school district have their property representing their needs and ours representing our needs, but that those would intermingle, and they would be possibly joint uses. They would complement one another. But if the school district, like you made a good point, when we get done with the master planning effort, we may be in different places as far as building that property out. But we would still need to find funding for that, and there could be various options. So it could be that the city has and the school district try to obtain funding together jointly, or it could be that we obtain funding separately. I really think that that's going to be something that we're going to need to look at the end of the master planning process, depending on what the outcome of the process is. So I don't think the city has necessarily a plan B, but that there could be an opportunity for the city to find funding on our own if the school district's not ready, or vice versa, or we could find funding together as two organizations. Does that answer your
it's
question?
complicated.
It is
for
very
sure.
complicated.
But I'm wondering if it wouldn't be an exercise that would be at a pretty high level, and you already probably know this from what the recreational needs are for the city, to just say, okay, what would it look like to just have the land that's available to us to develop, and how much would it cost? And not to say, well, we're going to go it alone or anything, but just to say, okay, should we look at this as a community as that with that as an option? I don't know.
I think that's likely something that we'll look at as part of the master planning process. There'll be different conceptual plans that are going to be developed, and I do think it's likely that the city's interests and needs around a multi-generational sort of community center with a variety of things is going to be more defined, likely, than what the school district's going to be able to do. So I think that's going to be one of the options that'll be part of the package.
It's just a thought, and then how does it fit into the property that could be developed for recreation over by the golf course? So. That's all I have.
Do you have anything? So when you go to council, they will be directing you to hire the consultant to outline the process. We have the phase 1 and phase 2, but this is this is phase 0 that they're funding or they're directing, right?
This is just directing staff to release an RFP. It's similar to what we did when we released the RFP for the aquatics program. We went to council to, it's to sort of raise the process that we're going through, particularly because we're doing this combined with the school district, that we really want to raise their awareness that this is the direction that we're heading, and we would like their support and approval to do that.
And this is an RFP, though. It's not for phase 1. It's for the
This
planning.
is an RFP. It's just to get the consultant on board.
Okay. And so different consultants then will say what they can do and their expertise, and we'll choose from that. And
Exactly.
that consultant will guide us into
phase 1.
Okay. Very good. We do have a speaker card. Penny Elson.
Good evening. Thank you. I just have a couple of questions. I'm a former member of the Cubberley Community Advisory Committee. And I just want to make the point that teacher housing, which is included in this report, was never vetted in any of our discussions. And as a representative of my neighborhood, I never brought that question to our neighborhood. So I have no idea what their opinion is on it. But I'm guessing that would bring it to a level of density that might cause some consternation. If we're still talking about doing a school and a community center and housing, it's a lot at a location that is pretty intensively used and would be. So I noticed in here that you refer to the community asset evaluation, which we refer to in the community in the committee as a community needs assessment, which is a rather different thing. If you're looking at the existing community assets, that's one thing, but what we talked about was a survey or a way of studying what the community needs or deficits might be. So what do we not have that perhaps we need? Not just what do we have that we need more of, I just want to make sure that, or maybe that work was done as part of the community master planning, I don't know, but that was what was in our minds, is we felt like there was a big gap in our knowledge. We didn't know, what it was that the community needed. And finally, as always, Safe Routes to School is big in my mind. So as this process moves forward, I hope that the people who are working on it will give careful thought to how much traffic this site and all the approach streets can handle at certain times of day, and how it's going to manage bicycles, because it's going to be an after-school destination, I imagine. It might be a school destination. And to the school district, one of the things I'm going to say, and I'm going to say it publicly now, is we need to think very carefully about whether or not that should be a choice school or a neighborhood school, because that's an area that is already impacted by traffic from a nearby private school that draws about 500 kids a day from outside of the community, all driven to school. Hoover Elementary School, a choice school, very high volume of car trips, and Greendale, of course, which it draws a mixture. It's got kids from all over the community, and many of them are driven, but also many bicycle. So and there are a lot of nearby schools. It's a very sensitive area with a lot of congestion in the morning. So traffic's going to be a key concern. Thanks. Good night.
Okay, thank you, Penny. Okay. Do you have any last comments? Okay, we're moving on. Next is ad hoc committee and liaison updates. Does anyone have any updates in there? I guess we have the grid this month. Does anyone want to talk about their updates? We have a status update for all the ad hocs. If anyone thinks that a verbal explanation would be better, otherwise the grid will do. You're up.
No, I like this process. It was really helpful to me to sort of see where other ad hoc committees are and what we needed to do. And then I think it was helpful to the committees that I'm on that to sort of be able to request from the staff the things that we felt that we needed to get our work done or more information. So I'm excited that we've tried this. Thank you for putting it all together, and I think we should let it run for a couple more months and see how we all feel about it.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's some added benefit. Go ahead.
Yeah, I like this process very much. The good and the bad of it is that I got lots of things I want to do right now, and then we need staff to do them right now. So it focuses like a laser, and you've got 10 of us, 10 different committees, all wanting to focus like a laser. So what do you suggest for getting staff time for these items? Do we make an appointment, a 30-minute appointment with you? What would you suggest?
So in all of them, there is a staff liaison assigned, so I would reach out to the staff liaison, which is, I think, pretty much me and Darren for most of them. So whoever's assigned, you can reach out and we can just have a conversation about a timing. So there may be something that's staff knows would be more appropriate to include the ad hoc in a few months, or maybe there's a reason to include the ad hoc sooner, but don't hesitate to contact us and just ask us we could talk through it and see what the best role for the ad hoc is at that time.
Okay. Don, do you have anything?
Thank you.
No? Okay. Then we move on. The department report is done. Comments and announcements. Do you have any comments or announcements? Does anyone?
Oh, I do. Sorry. Go ahead.
The Friends of the Palo Alto Parks have invited us to their next meeting, which is in September. So Don and I are going to represent the commission.
Is it anything specific, or just they just want to contact with us?
That was the thing, is that one of the things they were very interested in was the AT&T property, but Darren has said that that's a very slow process, and I wish there were a way to speed that up. We have 2 months before we have to go before that committee, and so if there was any way we could get something before then, that would be great. So that's one of the things.
But I think their outreach was just a general, we'd like an update, come and talk to us.
That's good, yeah.
Have coffee.
Interaction with them is always very good. We need to stay tightly connected. AT&T property, they have not redrawn the lines yet. Okay, so it's a no-go till they do that. Have you heard anything new? Is it just, okay.
I believe that AT&T and the city are still working on the lot line adjustments.
Okay. And are we talking directly with AT&T, or are we talking through the lot line people? I mean, what's the route that the parks people are talking to AT&T?
So it's our real estate department is mostly working with the company that AT&T has hired to do the lot line adjustment, but we're also directly communicating with AT&T as well.
Okay, so if it goes up for sale, we will know quickly.
We would.
Okay. Good.
One more question, and that is that when I reviewed the transcript of the May 22nd meeting with the City Council about the master plan, they had many, many comments, Foothills Park opening it up and bicycles and many, many items. But do you feel that we're going to get some pushback from the City Council for the reason I wanted to push for this version to go is that I'm worried that there's going to be some last minute changes or issues, and we'll never get this approved. So what's your take on getting this approved by the council in September?
I think we're on track to get it approved. That's not uncommon for the council, and it's their prerogative to make final adjustments and revisions. That's okay. But I'm confident we've done a good job here, the commission, the staff, and the many members of the public. So helpful to have the commission there and speak in support. I think it'll get approved.
The last council meeting, I thought they'd have 20 or 30 comments, and they only really had one where we had to go back and change. So I think that's good news.
I had another comment about the chili cook-off, which I thought was great fun, so thank you for getting me in to be a judge. And I think Jeff and I both felt like it was great fun and great for the community, and we'd love to see more chili teams next year. So we'd like to have the commission challenge ourselves to find some chili teams, either to have our own or do some outreach. And if we each brought in 1 or 2 chili teams, we'd get back up to the 25, and I think it could be really good. So I didn't want to lose sight of that, so I have this, and if we could address that in the agenda, maybe in November or something, we could start to do that. That'd be okay?
That would be great, and thank you for...
Did Pat Markovich have her team?
Pardon me?
Pat Markovich, was she on?
She was there, yeah.
She's there.
But she didn't win this time.
Okay.
So she wanted to win, but she didn't.
And thank you for being a judge. It is a fun event for staff and for everyone who attends. So thank you for being there.
It was great fun, and it was great fun for the community. People were all ages were enjoying the music and the dancing and the bowl and everything. And it's exactly what it was, a great 4th of July in Palo Alto. We just needed more teams. That's all.
I think we also wanted to encourage the other commissions to reach out to try and get participation.
Good.
Okay.
One other thing is the Midtown not picnic, what is it called?
The ice cream social.
Ice cream social. Yes. I encourage everybody to participate.
I have one more question. Rob, could you talk to us about your tenure and what's going on and when you're moving to the manager's office and all of that?
Yeah, I thought about whether to bring it up. We can talk about it next month as well, but we've begun the recruitment for my replacement, and we're working with a company, Terry Black, so they'll do a national search. We're almost finished with the brochure, so that will be out hopefully next week, and it'll be open for a month. I've already moved to the city manager's office, so I'm up there now, and have been doing both jobs for this month. I fly to Australia on the weekend to see my family for 2 weeks, and that also marks a transition for Kristen to step in as interim while we go through the process. And the city manager, Jim Keane, will make an announcement formally about that change. So that's the plan. It'll take 2 to 3 months to get through the process of recruiting. In fact, invite some of the commissioners to participate on the interview panels that we'll have for hiring the new director. So if you're interested in that, certainly let me know.
Certainly Ed helped out last time. I think that he has expertise in that area, so if you can get Ed, I think... Yeah, he was good. Okay. go ahead.
Just one quick question. We've talked about the AT&T property. The ITT property, is that on anyone's radar still about some of the direction of that? Darren took me out there maybe 3 months ago, and someone else came out from the city, and it made it seem like there's some simple things that could be done to kind of kickstart it. So just there doesn't need to be any response now, but something to keep on our minds, or maybe some agenda item in the next month or two, just to get an update on that. Thank you.
Yeah, there's so much work that we could do out there. If we had a big budget, we could do something really good, and unfortunately we don't. So I think it's just going to sit for a long time. Okay, let's move on to next month. We have 4 things. We have JMZ is going to come back with a PIO, and that's going to be an action item. Then we'll have 3 discussion items, one of them being park dedication, what activities are prohibited in park activities, and I want to talk about this whole MIME issue and just what can you do and what can't you do in a park. And the next is Rinconada long-term plan, and the final is the Buckeye Creek hydrology study update. Is there anything else?
There's not, unless we discuss the master plan that's coming to council, as Commissioner Cribbs recommended. But I will say these 4 items here are all very long, could possibly be very lengthy items.
Yeah.
So we may want to consider
Which could we push out?
even moving one of these out.
Buckeye Creek?
Yeah.
I think, well, if it hadn't been for this MIME issue, I would have said, let's push out the park dedication. That was just for information only. Rinconada long-range plan, is there anything new on that? Or is that just an update? Oh, but that's with JMZ, isn't it? They kind of dovetail together. So maybe it, well, let's either bump out park dedication or Buckeye Creek. Let's figure out with Darren what, if there's news.
I would be willing to let the chairman work with staff to determine the agenda.
Okay. Well,
therefore, we propose the meeting be adjourned.
Do we have a second? Do we have a second? Okay.
I have just one question regarding Buckeye Creek. Is there a schedule to share that with council? To share a hydrology study that would be impacted by pushing that?
It was supposed to go to tonight, and we moved it to August. Yeah, it's, Rob said, I think it's fall, but I have to check with Darren on that.
Well, let's
like probably October at the time frame, I think.
Let's pencil in and let's confirm in a couple weeks, but let's pencil moving the park dedication 1 month back to September. And we'll see how we feel in 2 weeks.
Okay.
Okay. All in favor of adjournment? Aye. Okay.